Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me today in Miami to talk about Youngtimers, to talk about a changing landscape and some cars that appeal to me to add to the collection in the future. But we're here with parts of the Youngtimer Collection that are soon to be auctioned here in Miami with RM Sotheby's. There's a fantastic lineup of Mercedes, Alpinas, there's a Ferrari 512M, we've got the bright red Lambo, the Lamborghini LM002 amongst others. But I think we're in very much a changing landscape as newer generations are coming through who want to purchase cars for their collections that come from their childhood, that catch their heartstrings, that are very much an emotional choice. And that's where I think this is really quite interesting, especially with some of the cars that you see in the background behind me here. So let's have a walk around. Let's talk more about the cars that are here in detail that will be part of this auction, plus also a few that stand out that you might be seeing in my collection in the future. I always love when a lineup of cars features diversity like this. Everything from an SLR to even the Ken Block Gymkhana Fiesta over the other side. There are 21 cars actually that form the Youngtimer part of the upcoming RM Sotheby's Miami auction on the 10th of December. But let's take a run through. Let's talk about what we're looking at here before we can dive into a bit more of what stands out to me as well. But very much cars now from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s forming this Youngtimer segment, this Youngtimer category that I really think is very much on the rise, as we saw especially a few days ago from an auction in Munich held by RM Sotheby's as well, with some BMW legends that sold for incredible figures. But we start here in fact with the Mercedes 560 SE AMG 6 litre from 1989, 385 horsepower, 4-speed auto gearbox. This was actually one of the last AMG cars really before they fully merged with Mercedes-Benz. It had a $43,500 engine conversion to make it that full 6 litre AMG spec. We move on to the Bentley Turbo RT Mulliner from 1999. This was a final special order version basically of the Turbo R line. This is one of only 56 cars, I believe the only one in fact from 1999, with less than 6,000 miles on it in the uncommon triple black specification, black over black basically. Next to that, Mercedes SLR McLaren Roadster, and you guys know how much of a fan I am of both Mercedes products and McLaren products, so it's a no-brainer that maybe one day one of these could be on the horizon, although the 5-speed auto has always let it down slightly in my eyes. This being a Roadster means it's one of only 670 with 19,000 miles on the clock in total. Next to that though, a very different Mercedes, the 450 SLC 5 litre, one of just under 3,000 cars, the rarest of the 107 chassis with a 5 litre V8 as well. Next to that we have the first of our Alpinas, and there are a few of them to take in. This is an Alpina B7 Turbo Coupe from 1986. It's number 58 of 110. It has a 334 horsepower 3.5 litre 6-cylinder, and it even comes with the original Alpina order form, which is kind of cool. Something very different though, blast back to 1974 with the Jaguar E-Type Series 3 V12 Roadster, 5.3 litre V12 with a 4-speed manual, factory AC and the chrome wheels as well, and even the full Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust Production Records trace certificate included with the car as well. Before the last of the lineup on this side is the Bentley Azure from 2009, the final production year of the Azure, 11,000 miles on this car, one of only 131 left-hand drive cars from 2009. But we're going to skip on through and head round before we get back to some of these. The line of epic cars continues, but we have more here in the lineup from the Youngtimer Collection, starting with this beast, the Mercedes 560 SEC 6 litre wide body, 6 litre Super Coupe. This particular example has only 15,000 miles, but just look at it. Those wide arches front and rear, the aggressive splitter with the AMG lettering, the blacked out grille, that is an absolute monster. Next to it is a Porsche 928 GTS from 1995, actually the most powerful 928 derivative. This particular example has only 14,000 miles and is one of just 26 US left-hand drive cars. We're back then to another Mercedes. This time we have the 500 SL AMG 5 litre, and it's the first of only 8 cars for the North American market featuring the 5-speed manual with this 276 horsepower AMG 5 litre V8 engine. We've then got something from a very different era, the BMW M5 from 2014. This car has just 27,000 miles, painted in BMW's individual frozen black metallic, also with a satin black wrap over the top as it happens, before we then get to the Ferrari that I mentioned, the 512 M. Now the M stands for Modificata. It was the last final version of the Testarossa. So the Testarossa, the 512 TR, and then the 512M. There were only 75 US Modificata examples, and this is the 52nd of those. The last Ferrari with the horizontally opposed 12-cylinder engine, and it's absolutely iconic thing from its era. We then have a Bentley Arnage T from 2007, featuring the 2007 upgrades to 500 horsepower, before tucked in at the end here, the Alpina B6 2.8 from 1979, the E21 chassis. This is actually number 51 out of 533, features the 2.8 litre inline six with the 5-speed manual gearbox. Then something a little bit different, the Ken Block Gymkhana Ford Fiesta. This was actually the first of Ken Block's Ford cars in Gymkhana, has 69 million views from Gymkhana 3, with the Olsberg's Duratex turbo 4-cylinder engine making 600 horsepower. Under the cover, not for the auction, is a Ford Model AA. Before we sneak through here, a couple more BMWs. First, we have the BMW M6 from 1988, 12,000 miles, highly original car, one of only 1,767 US cars. Then we've got another B7 Turbo Coupe from 1987, one of just 20 with the B73 engine, one of only 20 in total. But then it's Lambo time, the original Lamborghini truck. The trucks that they made initially to be for military use, featuring the V12 from the Countach. They went on though to make just over 300, I think it was 301 examples in production form. This car in the Rosso paintwork has only 5,500 miles and is infinitely cool. If you think about the rarity, the looks, what it is, what it stands for, the LM002 is one of the coolest things out there, and certainly for any Lamborghini collection, a real standout. If we continue through past the SL55, that's not part of the auction. We've got a couple of others just to touch on. The BMW Z8, one of just under 1,000, 23,000 miles on that, just under 400 horsepower. Bond car, of course, making it very cool. The Mini's also just here for storage. We've then got the Lotus Esprit. This is a V8 25th anniversary, number 55 of 100 cars from the US market, 335 horsepower, 3.5 litre V8, 5-speed manual, and the solar yellow looks cool. We've got another Mercedes SLR McLaren. This is a coupe, 3,000 mile, 2-owner car on that one. Bentley Continental SC from 1999, one of 73 SCs, 48 were left-hand drive. Also has the removable Sedanka coupe roof panels that you have up top from the front part of the cabin. Those are removable. It's in Mulsanne green over the Magnolia interior. And lastly, the BMW M3 30 Yara edition, one of 150 for the US, 6-speed manual, and that car's only got 181 miles on the clock. So lots and lots of cool cars, as you can see in this lineup, but it's all about the Mercs for me. You guys know how much I am a big fan of the Mercedes. I've got a fair few in my collection. Something like the 512M has obviously been part of the huge rise of increase in earlier generation cars that we've seen with the rise of the investment market, we can say, and that's certainly the direction a lot of Youngtimer type cars are heading at the moment. These are cars that people who have now grown a little more, we can say, had on their posters when they were younger. They're reaching that period of interest, and also very different to what you can buy now. You know, new AMGs are their EQ variants of the EQS and EQC, for example, whereas something like that, it's just a monster and won't really exist ever again. There are also 4 other cars from the Youngtimer collection which will be at the RM Sotheby's auction here in Miami. There's a Porsche flat nose in red, very cool thing, plus a 1994 Turbo 3.6, a 1996 Turbo Coupe, so 3 Porsches, also a 25th anniversary Lamborghini Countach with only 4,000 miles in red as well. Lovely car. Picture that alongside this, the LM002, and I spoke about it as we were just going around. But the Rambo Lambo, which I drove for the first time actually, I think only last year, is something which is so utterly bonkers, and certainly you're not one to buy if you're thinking about fuel consumption, but has to be part of any Lamborghini collection. And look at the new cars. The Huracan Stirato has just launched, which is not a pickup, not a truck, not a thing like this. It's a super sports car for racing on the dirt, which is kind of crazy. But if we squeeze on, you know, through here, I think this era of BMW and Alpina cars is certainly one that stands out. It's an era that's just becoming more and more iconic with the different direction that modern BMWs have gone. Of course, the new M3, the new M5, you name it, nothing like these cars from yesteryear. And for people such as myself and people, you know, a decade even older than I am, that's what existed in our childhoods. Those are the kind of cars that really stood out. And that's why right now there's so much attention and interest in these kind of cars. Get them while you still can. Who knows what the future is going to be? Can we still drive these things? Can we still enjoy these things? They're becoming immensely collectible, also due to the numbers. You hear some of the numbers that I'm telling you of how few of these cars that have been produced. It's really quite crazy. Now I want to just quickly try and pivot this forwards to show you the 5.3 litre V12 that we have in here, the engine bay of the Jaguar E-Type. Always love that, the way the bonnet hinges forwards. And look at that. You know, this is from back in the 70s, of course. Very different to some of the stuff we have now, but very, very, very cool as well. Let me delicately close this back down, click it into place for the time being. So as you know, for me, I've talked a little bit in recent times about cars that stand out. I drove a BMW 1M not all that long ago, and having had a BMW 1 Series of that generation, for me, that's absolutely shot up there on my shortlist. But also, I grew up with the likes of E46 M3s. I'd love an E46 M3. I drove the M3 CSL for the first time only a month or two ago, and that was a really, really cool experience for sure. Would love one of those. Thinking other things, Audi R8, original R8, manual V8 version. Might not have been the fastest thing in the world, but so iconic, one of the coolest Audis ever. In fact, talking cool Audis, A1 Quattro, that's definitely a car that's up there on my list. But also, you know, when it comes to the older Lamborghinis, like the LM002 and the Countach, for me, a car that really I would love is a Gallardo Spider. The Gallardo was such, I don't know, an icon of the period when I started making videos. So again, one that really stands out. Yes, one day I'm almost certainly going to have to add an SLR to the collection. It just feels like it will be an absolute must to sit between the McLarens and the Mercedes, you know, with the different Black Series cars, the GT, the SLS, the C63, but also with my Senna and my 675 LT Spider. For McLaren, other than the F1, this is really where they began with road cars. And you know, when it comes to values of the hypercars from the 90s, the likes of the McLaren F1, the likes of even now the Bugatti EB110s, the Ferrari F50, values have very quickly done that. F50s, I mean, I remember when they were a couple of £100,000, now they would be a couple of million minimum. EB110s, wasn't that long ago, they were sub $1 million, now they'll be a couple of $1 million. McLaren F1s, it wasn't very long ago, probably 10 years ago, they were a $1 million car. Now, 20 million, you name it. And that is of course why so many other things have increased in price. And it's really quite interesting because as people get older, you know, a car like this, it's very much at the young end of Youngtimers, early 2000s. But people who had these on their posters when they were kids aren't necessarily yet in the age bracket to have earned the position to be able to buy one. That's when, give it another decade or two, this will really get interesting. And I find this shift fascinating. You know, cars from the 60s have had their prime over the last 2 decades, let's say, and it's always moving. It's always ever changing. But Youngtimers at the moment are particularly, I think, in the sphere of interest, we could say, especially as some of the older things have just shot into unreachable categories. And it makes these kind of cars really quite appealing. Don't get me wrong, there are some very expensive cars here, and it'll be fascinating to see what they go for in the auctions, but definitely things that stand out to me. And you know, that list of cars I've just given you that are of interest to me down the line are just some of them. There are a few more than that, and maybe I'll have a full update, full overview at some point in the future. But for now, I'm looking forward to seeing as the Youngtimer Collection heads to the auction block with RM Sotheby's here in Miami on the 10th of December. It'll be fascinating to see what happens. So thank you for joining me for this tour, this walk around. That's going to be it for this time. I look forward to catching up with you again very soon, and who knows, maybe something from here might even end up at the Shmeemuseum. We shall see. That's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, I appreciate your support an awful lot, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.